Good afternoon and welcome to Brunch and Budget on Bonfire Radio with your host, Pamela Capalid, a certified financial planner here to help take the bite out of your budget, brunchandbudget.com. I'm your sound provider, Dialect, and here's your host, Pamela Capalid.
Thank you, Dialect, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in on this Sunday afternoon. I believe it is officially the start of summer, and it's Father's Day. Happy Father's Day. Happy start of summer.
I'll believe both when I see it.
Aw, I know. This weather has been hit and miss, hasn't it? Ay, ay, ay. Well, today we're going to talk about something fun. The rent control laws in New York City expired on Monday. Yay!
So wait, so there's
Happy Father's Day.
So there's no control on rent? We can rent for whatever we want? Yeah, landlord, next month you are getting gummy bears.
I don't think that's how it works.
No gummy bears for rent?
No.
Just out of control rent?
No, gummy bears for rent, if only. No, what that means is about 50% of the, 47% to be exactly, of the apartments in New York City are rent stabilized, which means that the landlords can only increase the rent a certain percentage every year up to a certain threshold. And so those laws have expired while Albany, the state legislature in Albany, is still trying to figure out what to do. Should they renew it as it is? Should they change some of the laws? The law isn't perfect right now, and we're going to be going over a little bit more of that later, but they're kind of still at this point where they're not sure what to do yet and nothing is resolved. So Cuomo is like, yo, landlords, if you take advantage of this small window of time where they've expired, then there will be repercussions. But we'll see what happens. Well,
there's also the whole education tax credit thing that's involved in this whole rent thing.
Yeah, definitely. That got passed, so something's happening.
Oh, so then it's gonna happen.
Yeah. So are you talking about the public schools thing, right? And the private school tuition tax break.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So
for those who don't know, that's been, I guess, somehow sneakily attached to this is
how so, Dialect?
Well, it was apparently a thing where it was supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't part of the agenda at all, and then we couldn't talk about the rent until this got resolved. What's going on from Cuomo here?
That's very strange. So before we go into more of that, I wanted to do a little investment appetizer today. Is buying a home an investment? Now, there are two schools of thought. People do think I think the most popular school of thought is that buying a home is an investment. It's one of your biggest investments as a consumer.
Right, that's what people say.
Yeah, definitely, and it appreciates in value, and you've heard tons of stories about people who, buy their home in 1970 at, $18,000 or something, and now it's worth $1 million.
But doesn't investment means a couple of different things to people.
Mm-hmm.
And there's I'm down with the whole, buying a home is an investment. Yeah, buying a home is an investment, but it's like an investment you keep.
Yes.
At least in that kind of mentality with me, rather than are we saying is it the kind of investment where, I know there's house flippers and all, but is it in general the type of thing you make for the idea of making money?
Well, my school of thought, and I think it's becoming more prevalent, is if the home is your primary home, then it's not really an investment. It's a liability to you. If you have a mortgage on it, then money is coming out of your pocket every single month, and it's not going back in. Yes, technically and theoretically, your house might go up in value, but if you lost your job tomorrow, you couldn't take a part of your house, sell it, and buy groceries with it.
I thought that's what a second mortgage was for. For the groceries.
That's right. The groceries and the college education, right? And that's dangerous territory. So the second mortgage is really just you taking out more debt on what you've already put into the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not really an investment. You're not really getting a return on it. There's not really a percentage you're getting back from it by taking out a second mortgage. You're actually just taking money back out of the house that you put into it.
Word, that makes sense.
Yeah, so that is what a second mortgage really is. And really, the reason I bring this up is because a lot of people come to me and they say, hey, should I buy a house? And I ask them why, and they say, well, I heard it was a really good investment. And when you look at some of the housing prices and you hear these anecdotes about people, selling their house for $1 million after 30 years, then it might seem like one. But really, while you're living in it, while you're paying a mortgage, while you're paying property taxes and utilities, your house is your house. It's the place where you live. It's not really an investment. It's not something you can liquidate. It's not something that you can't take advantage of the appreciation and value until you actually sell it. And so unless it's a property that you purchased as an investment property where you plan to take rental income, then it's really just the place you live. And if you're thinking about buying a house, the reason shouldn't be because it's a good investment. And so that's something to keep in mind when you're going through your pros and cons of should I buy a house here.
I guess with investments, should you think of things, and I'm kind of just throwing this out there, as not a first-time thing, or not a when you only have one of thing. If you have one house, your house is not investment.
If you have one house that you live in, yeah.
If you have 3 houses, 1 or 2 of those houses is an investment.
Yeah, and I'd even take it a step further, and I know people who have second homes as vacation homes, and that I wouldn't consider an investment.
Right, okay.
It has to be income producing at the time to be an investment, because that means that you are making money off of it.
Oh.
An investment is something that you make money off of. There's a risk that you might not make money off of it. For instance, if rent prices go down in the area where the house is, or, there's a big housing bubble and housing crash, but the intention of an investment is that you plan to make money off of the money that you put into it.
Okay, so I guess that puts to bed a lot of assumptions of things that are investments, because what I'm thinking about when I'm saying that my house or extra houses would be an investment, that comes from the thinking, and I've talked to a lot of folks like that, we're thinking a second car is an investment. The car that's not the main car you drive. It's a pretty car. It's a classic. You
like a
fixed it
classic
up.
car.
But it's the same type of thing where unless you have like a specifically classic car that is going to rise in value, it's a liability. You've got a thing that even though it's just sitting there and you're not doing stuff to it, it's only depreciating.
Yeah, exactly.
And that
it's
is
taking
not an
away
investment.
money. Yeah.
It's a thing that you got for you for later, which is the denotativist definition of investment, but that still doesn't mean it's an investment for
right
you.
Exactly. And it's it's hard to call tangible things an investment, and the reason why stocks
say that again.
It's hard to call tangible things an investment.
That's something I haven't thought of.
And the thing is, the reason why stocks are an investment is because it doesn't really cost you anything to keep them technically. I mean, you pay fees for an investment manager to manage them for you, but it's not sitting in your garage taking up space,
Exactly,
It's something where if you needed to sell stock tomorrow to buy groceries, you could do it. That's a big distinction.
You could sell the car tomorrow too, but
it would not in the same way. It's not as liquid as a stock investment.
Well, if you got to sell your car tomorrow to buy groceries, you're probably going to end up taking a loss.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's not really. Yeah, then it wasn't really a good investment then.
So the fun thing that you own that's awesome to you, it's not an investment.
Yeah, and also
that classic Megatron you have sitting above your computer.
Yeah,
that's awesome for you. Not an investment.
Don't think of it as an investment, and don't buy something because you think it's an investment, and don't use it as a way to justify buying something.
Oh man, 12-year-old me. Can we call 12-year-old me?
Oh man, or some of your friends right now. Just kidding.
Ooh, I need to know who's sitting on stuff that ain't worth nothing.
We're talking about rent control today in New York City.
Right.
And first of all, the rent control law. Anyway, so that was the conclusion there.
Yes. I got that. That was the end. So what do we do about it? Nothing. Anyway,
nothing.
Rent.
Yep. Nothing. No. Just think about that next time you want to justify something as an investment. Is it really an investment? Is it really something that if you had to sell it tomorrow, you'd have more money because of it? So rent control laws,
liquidity, right?
Liquidity is a big thing.
Right, is the big thing with it.
Liquidity, appreciation, and having it not cost you money while you own it.
Bam. Say that one more again. That was beautiful.
Yeah, having it not cost you money while you own it.
That plus liquidity and appreciation, that's an investment on a monetary tip.
Yes. On a very basic level, that's how you should think of it.
Any other investment is an emotional one.
Oh, I like that.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
no,
that's
you're
fine.
right.
Because
If you're
technically
investing
you're
in
investing.
art, if you're investing in collectibles, things like that, it's stuff you enjoy and you want to collect, and other people might place value on it at some point. But
Yeah, I just want to throw it out there that it's not like those things suck, just 'cause
Yeah,
you're not-
yeah. No, those things are great. You should keep collecting them. It's awesome. So, rent control laws. So, before we go to a song, I just want to explain a little bit the difference between rent controlled and rent stabilized because people
yes.
interchange the terms pretty often. But in New York City, rent control and rent stabilized mean very different things. So, rent control, and this is going away more and more, is if you lived in an apartment before 1947, so, right after World War II, the landlord was only allowed to raise the rent 7.5% every year up to a maximum base rent amount. So, basically, that was rent control. There was a maximum base rent amount that went up slightly every 2 years, and the landlord was only allowed to raise up to that maximum base amount and only up to 7.5%. So, basically what happens is the rules are if the tenant moves out or if the tenant dies, then the rent-controlled apartment becomes rent-stabilized. Now, rent-controlled apartments actually only make up 1.2% of the rental market. So the whole idea of someone paying $400 for, a 4-bedroom flat in the Upper West Side is very few and far between. There's a legacy there that's left, and it's probably someone who's been living there since the 40s or the 50s.
Right.
And it's going away. It's something where those laws kind of got replaced with the rent stabilized laws in the 1970s and got cut off. So the idea of, these little old ladies in these apartments, keeping the rent low in the neighborhood is not really the case. You don't see that as much. And so rent stabilization is actually much more prevalent. Almost half of the 2.2 million available units in New York City, 47% are rent stabilized. This was started in the 70s because there was a lot of inflation and the rising cost of housing going on in the 70s. And, as a rule of thumb, rent-stabilized apartments are in buildings that were built before 1974. They have to have 6 or more units, and the new rent is below $2,500 per month. So rent-stabilized basically means that your spot was built before 1974, and your rent is under $2,500 a month. And so that means that the building, and it has to be a pretty big building, it has to be more than 6 units. So that means...
Okay, so it can't be one of those little apartments.
Yeah,
like cut up a house thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
Like if you're a landlord who has a tenant living upstairs, for instance, then you're not subject to rent stabilization laws. It's really for the big apartment buildings to prevent them from jacking up the rent.
Right. So we don't get that whole slumlord situation.
Exactly. And so in 1993, the rules were that the rent had to be below $2,000 and the tenant had to be making less than $75,000 a year. And in 2011, that threshold increased to $2,500 for the rent, and the tenant had to be making $200,000 a year. So the other...
Is that a combined...
Yes.
Amount? Okay.
So a tenant who makes more than $200,000 a year, which is a lot of money, cannot live in a rent-stabilized apartment.
Right. It should be the whole... Wait. If a group of tenants, if it was like 3 people in an apartment and they made a combined $190, would they be okay?
Oh, no, one person.
Oh, this is one person.
This is for
okay,
one
I was
person.
just checking.
Yeah.
So, wow. So if you're making $185, you can get yourself in a rent-stabilized apartment?
Yeah. I mean... The thing with rent stabilized is it can only increase by 1% every year, and on a 1-year lease, and only 2.75% on a 2-year lease. And so what happens is after the rent reaches the $2,500 threshold, is the apartment is actually no longer rent stabilized.
Right.
So when you cross that $2,500 threshold in a rent-stabilized place, then the landlord can charge whatever they want. So it becomes a market rate apartment once it crosses the $2,500 mark.
Now let's talk to us about the market rate apartment.
So, I mean, in Manhattan, I don't know if you've heard, but the average apartment for a 1-bedroom is around $4,000. Yeah. It is pretty brutal out there. And so The thing with rent stabilization is it's not even like the apartment is like that forever. It's just that it's stabilized so that if you decide to live there and you want to raise a family there, you can stay there for 10 or 15 years and not get kicked out by the landlord, not see an increase in rent prices. You'll be able to stay in that apartment.
Because to clarify, the market rate apartment thing means what the F ever, right?
Yeah.
That's what market rate means.
Yeah.
Whatever I want.
It's whatever the market will allow you to rent it for.
Whatever. And by the way, what the market will allow is thief code for what I can get away with.
Yeah, basically.
Right?
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Whenever somebody says something about what the market will allow, they talking about robbing you. I ain't never heard that without
totally
somebody
fair.
having a knife in my back.
You're right. So right now, these rent stabilization laws actually expired on Monday, as we mentioned, and the state legislature is still trying to figure out what to do with the laws. After this song, we're going to go over some of the proposals that de Blasio made and some of the things that the state legislature is debating over and why it's taking so long to actually pass new rent stabilization laws.
Word. We're going to go into, you know what? We've lost a couple of artists in our scene over the past couple of weeks. It's been a tough time for a lot of folks all around. So I wanted to play some music from some of our peoples who you're not going to get to see rock live, unfortunately. And I'm going to start out with my sister and yours, It's Real Light, with Reality. This is her rocking in the studio. She's singing, she's the one spitting, and she's the one beatboxing. She does lots of things. So peace to It's Real Light, and we're going to check you soon. Brunch and Budget, Bonfire Radio.
Yeah. Wah, 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 wah. Yeah. Oh, wow. Wait a minute. I feel like we watching golf. It's like, really, man? Can we get the hip hop clap going? Can we get up in here with this? Can we? All right, let's see. As sweat creeps from pores and so capillaries, the temperature outside is 16. 1 plus 6 is 7, number of complete divinity, and you wonder why you sweat for me. Sweat for me. Sweat me. Sweat me is like sweating realism in 3D prisms. Fill my rainbow, constrict your pot of gold, bling, bling, oh, you like shiny things. Well, take the words that exude these lips, freeze them, polish them, bling, bling, and chill. For every syllable I spit is poetry. For the poor minds I treat, singing using the same vocal cords, I just strike them differently. Vibrations, unity and duality. Virgos, masses of purity, feminine energies. A male Virgo is serious real. 200% feminine is unreal, so how can I feel the purity I willed on earth as it is in 7? Giving you this day food for thought, feel fed. The poor minds I treat with this poetry, singing dreams, so sweat me.
I'm sorry. I was into the beat. Can I make my dream your reality? Can I
to the point of speaking freely. Free me from the confines of this false consciousness. I have been undermined. They say if you can't beat them, join them, so make me subconscious, free me, become hindsight to my double-jointed backside, backflipping, bending over backwards to reach back to your roots, dig me, lay vertical to my horizontal wingspan, see ebon skies through closed eyes, experience the joints of double ebon thighs. Free me.
And we are back. Welcome back. Brunch and Budget, Bonfire Radio. I have to apologize a little bit, but only a little bit. We have a wealth of Israelite stuff here in the studio. I played the wrong version of the right song. I had a studio version. It was a real cool version. It was one of them hold up the mic type of things, one of them conscious specials. But there was a live version where we got to hear crack a crazy beatbox solo at the end. So it's always fun to hear our sister Israelite. We miss you very much. Rest in beats and all that good stuff. And we're here on Brunch and Budget on Bonfire Radio talking about the rent being too damn high, or the rent being possibly too damn high.
Yes, or not high enough for the people who want to take away the rent control laws. Oh my gosh, it's all craziness. And I have to say, I have to retract a statement from earlier about the education tax credit. I was referring to a bill that would give a tax credit to people and companies donating to private school scholarship funds, and I got the bill's a little bit mixed up. So, Dialect, why don't you fill us in?
No. I mean, it's also not a crazy thing because it's basically kind of that.
Is it really similar?
Well, it's the same thing, and when you do your research on them, it's all the same. They have all those articles, the ones from January and the current ones.
How are they related to this rent stabilization thing?
Well, they're not. It's 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 your typical thing. You know how politicians are like, yo, what is the one that they did recently where they were? Oh yeah, there was this anti-human trafficking bill. And because people are terrible, they were like, oh, no, not because people are terrible, because people hate women. Whenever you find yourself fighting against feminism, remember that the world hates women and always has. But because people hate women, they decided that they needed to sneak on a bill that would deny funds for women who were got pregnant as a result of being sex trafficked to have abortions because, again, the world is terrible. So similarly... it's kind of like this. Cuomo's trying to be the mediator. He's trying to be in between.
He's
and
trying to,
the Senate and the Assembly aren't. They both have once, and he's trying to see if he can broker. You know.
Gotcha.
The craziness thing is, the Assembly, they're not into the tax credit that he wants to give
to the private school donors.
To the private school donors, because. The people who are behind this, by the way, are mostly your smaller parochial schools. These are the ones, it's not like your big money private schools are super amped about this. I'm sure, they won't be mad. But the people who are pushing hard are your lobbyists on the religious school side.
Interesting.
Your smaller Catholic schools, your Lutheran ones, all those guys.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that actually in this whole, I know we're sidebarring here on the education tip, but I love talking about that. They're the ones that feel they're getting the short end of the stick as your charter schools are getting more attention. And, as always, people are trying to get our public school stuff together. So they want this, and the Senate wants to get the housing stuff together. So Cuomo's like, what if I get y'all
Oh, what if you like?
You compromise a little here, you
one,
compromise
one
a little
you
here,
pass
and
the
nobody's
other?
happy.
Oh, is that how it goes?
It's well, I mean, that is isn't that the definition of
Wow.
compromise?
I guess so.
I don't know. That's what folks say. I think it's a little dark for me. But you get what I'm saying.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So
there are two things that are not
Gotcha.
inextricably tied together. And in fact, it's not even like they're a monetary check and balance for each other.
No, not at all. They seem really unrelated, and if they just happen to be happening at the same time, it sounds like.
Well, it's just a trade. I'm going to give you a little bit of that if you give me a little bit of that.
Freaking politics,
Well,
people.
this is the concern. Imagine that you are a young parent in New York City and you are concerned about living in a space where you can, one, continue to afford to pay your rent for the next 10 or 20 years because Lord knows you're not trying to move your kid in the middle of their schooling year. Life is, no one wants to do that. It's a big, crazy mess.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you want to make sure that you are going to be able to get your kid in the neighborhood you live into one of the good schools, because remember, our public schools are very segregated by location and access to funds. So, I mean, while they're not technically linked on a legal tip, as a parent or a prospective renter in New York, I think you would be concerned about these two together.
Yeah. Yeah, and it sounds like the state legislature is trying to finagle a little bit of both going on here. So this is where we are, and this is kind of where the standstill is happening. And de Blasio, if you haven't seen the news, has been blasting Cuomo for the last couple weeks about the fact that this is expiring, and they haven't done anything about it.
I swear de Blasio spoke about this months ago, actually.
He did, and now that nothing's happened, even though he's sent in 3 proposals, he's basically put them on blast. He's basically said, you let this expire, it's your fault, and he put in 3 different changes that he wanted to see in the rent stabilization laws a couple months ago. For instance, right now, a rent-stabilized apartment is no longer protected when it reaches $2,500. That's crazy, right?
That's crazy.
Just like we mentioned before the song, when it hits $2,500, the landlord can do whatever they want.
Right.
So if you move into a place and it's $2,450 next year, it'll cross that threshold and it will no longer be rent stabilized.
And I was saying the thing about, the multiple tenants, they don't care how many people you got living in there. So you could have a giant warehouse that you're renting out for that. I used to live, in the Opera House. Big negative shout out to y'all evil so-and-sos. And hold my tongue a little bit. But we moved in and they quickly were pushing it up towards the $2,500 because it was like 5 or 6 of us in the place.
They probably weren't
We're paying over
rent-stabilized.
$2,000. Oh yeah, they probably weren't rent stabilized in the first place.
Yeah, they probably weren't rent stabilized. if they
See,
could
I
do
was about to
that.
theorize that's why they kept trying to nudge it up.
Yeah,
to
because you can only
25.
nudge it up 1% every year. That's what makes it rent
Oh,
stabilized.
then we were not rent stabilized. Whew.
No, you were definitely a market
Right,
rate
you said
situation.
that.
Yeah. So that's the thing with rent stabilized is it takes longer to get to $2,500, but once you reach there, that makes no sense. And so essentially, the mayor wants to get rid of that rule and wants to make sure that more expensive rent stabilized apartments will still be under rent stabilization laws. Because right now, rent stabilized apartments are disappearing. And it's making it less and less affordable to live in New York City for the average person. The other...
Because excuse me for interrupting, but you can't just go back to the rent stabiliziness.
No, no. And why would a landlord want to do that?
Completely understand. Just like there's just no way.
Yeah, you're technically not a rent stabilized apartments once you cross the $2,500 threshold.
I just think about the cycle of New York City, and this is why I know this sounds like a silly question, but how it is in New York is some new place comes and gets hot, folks come and develop it, they let the old thing fall to. But it seems kind of crazy and unsustainable that once something passes a certain threshold, and then we can't bring it back down.
Yeah, you can't take it back. And so the threshold doesn't even really make sense if you want to keep apartments affordable and, keep it in line with inflation right now.
Isn't that the weird thing about the quote-unquote market? The idea that you would not want to keep apartments affordable, because, who wants to keep apartments affordable? I want to make as much money as I possibly can.
Right, and there's a market for it. People are willing to pay for it.
But that market always has a threshold regardless, and You don't care about keeping apartments affordable, about continuing the process of apartments being a thing that people afford. You're just concerned with getting as much as you can.
Right.
Even if you stop the wheel.
Well, and I feel like that's the biggest issue with thinking as a landlord of yourself as just this individual person where what you do doesn't affect the whole. And so I think that that's one of the biggest problems with thinking about it this way is it's very selfish, and it very much doesn't keep the bulk of the city citizens in a place where they can stay here. And I think that's what rent stabilization is for, and that's why it's in place, is because we need to have some kind of regulation and not let the free market determine what the rent should be all the time. And I'm going to go over later just some arguments that people make for getting rid of rent stabilization altogether. But yeah, there's a big push in a lot of major cities to just get rid of rent stabilization.
Right.
And, let the market determine, and then it'll be equalized. And anyway, there's some stuff I'm going to read that we'll maybe get a little upset about. But before I go into that...
Well, before you go into that, I want to know.
What's your big reminder?
Oh, big reminder. The free market's not a thing that exists.
Yeah.
It's a made-up phrase.
Yeah.
It's,
say that again later, too.
Like, it's just like... you made me do it. Right.
I had to raise the rent this high.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it's bullshit, basically. So before I go into that, though, I want to go over 3 of de Blasio's proposed changes.
Word.
So we went through 1. He wanted to get rid of the $2,500 threshold. The other thing that is crazy is this thing called individual apartment improvement and major capital improvement. So the landlords have the right to permanently increase the rent when they renovate an apartment or an apartment building.
Makes sense.
But that takes it out of the rent stabilized apartment situation. So if they, for instance, renovate your rent stabilized apartment and they want to jack up the rent, they can do it.
Got you.
Yeah.
More loophole than actual improvement.
Yep, exactly.
Because what constitutes renovation? Any kind of change is
Has
renovation,
to be major.
right? Okay, there is
There's
a monetary threshold. Do you know?
I don't know if it's a monetary threshold. It seems like that it's just like a complete renovation. It can't just be like, I painted the walls.
Got you. Okay. Yeah, that's what I wanted to figure out.
It seems like they gutted it because it's called a major capital improvement.
Right.
Yeah. And so for the landlord, that can justify increasing the rent to the point where it takes it out of the rent stabilization range. And then the other thing is a vacancy allowance. So between one tenant leaving a rent stabilized apartment and another tenant taking it over, a landlord is allowed to increase the rent by 20%.
I knew that. Yeah.
That's crazy. To the point probably also where you're close to the threshold where it will take it out of this $2,500 range.
Easily, right?
Easily, yeah.
But like I've been told about, like, isn't that one of the, I guess, another loophole-y, tricky type of thing?
Yeah, and what's been happening is that, landlords have, this article put it in a nice way where they said they nudge tenants to vacate, but there's a lot of things that a lot of shady things landlords have done to just get people out of the apartment so they can increase the rent.
Well, that's like that, I forget who, was it, New Yorker? The interview with the anonymous Hasidic landlord who was saying that they nudge and that they bribe and they coerce and do other things to get tenants out, specifically black tenants.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Oh, I had to read the article because I swore it was my landlord. It wasn't. He was way too nice to have been, way too honest to have been my landlord.
Yeah, so we're kind of at a standstill because the Republican Senate wants to still keep working it out. They didn't want to just renew the law as it was. Nobody wanted to renew the law as it was, but one thing on the Republican side that they did want to address was the abuses of people who kept the lease on their rent-stabilized apartment and then subleased it to people for a profit.
Oh, yeah, which is a constant and consistent side hustle in New York. I can't even front on them like ain't nobody done that.
Yeah, lots of people do that.
I believe my first apartment in New York, I was a beneficiary of that. Which, it's tough. It's an abuse and all that kind of stuff. But, Lord, guys, you ain't never been in New York, have you? Because I don't know if you could have gotten a first apartment in New York without situation
subleasing.
existing.
Right.
It's annoying. It's like when the people who are complaining about their videos being pirated, trying to tell me that they didn't copy VHS tapes.
Right. I mean, I think that it's an interesting proposal to actually check the income requirements and not necessarily allow subleasing and things like that for something that's rent stabilized. You know, it's a toss-up, and I don't know exactly how they would fix this situation or how they would even know that it was happening, but it's something that they definitely want to find a way to address.
I hear that. One thing that's always been important to me in especially in my more crazier money days, is if we're going to have a free market I guess it's like race. It's not a thing, it exists, but it's a thing we have to acknowledge because the jerks who want to use it are in power.
Yeah.
But if a free market is a thing that exists, then there needs to be a submarket. There always is a submarket created.
That's true. That's a good
in
point.
really any instance, some type of black market of any kind of way. And I think that it's a fairly innocuous one that is more beneficial to the city in general, or to really any city. Because, I mean, I know it works here in New York, but anywhere, it's a thing. Like, like the tape sharing.
Right.
While pirating 8,000 movies at once is probably overkill, that one piece of information you needed to share.
Yeah, and it's part of interacting with a person.
I would say then my argument about, I guess, how it exists and what should be looked at by the Senate is if this is a thing that you could take and monetize and make a mass thing. Like if you could figure out a way to do this for 1,000 apartments at once, be some media, then things would have gone too far when you can exploit it to that degree.
Right.
But if you're just getting a place to live, I figure that's, not too bad collateral damage.
I mean, I think they're saying that enough people are doing it where the market abuse is clear,
I hear.
And so there are 1,000 people doing it, not one person doing it 1,000 times.
Word, that's what I'm saying. I'm down with 1,000 people doing it. That's 1,000 people here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the big compromise, though, between the Democrats and the Republicans, and between the Assembly and the Senate, essentially. And so
those of y'all who are looking to move here, if you're just skating by,
yeah. Well, I mean, the Democrats or the Assembly really wants to push for getting rid of that 20% vacancy rule, where you can increase and deregulate the apartment if someone moves out. And on the other side, the Republicans want to have some income verification rules set in place for people who are living in rent-regulated apartments. Which, on the one hand, I think that makes sense. You shouldn't be able to move into an apartment if you don't qualify, and I don't know if people are checking that. So we'll see what happens. Really, it's still at a standstill, even though it's been over a week since almost a week since it expired. Yeah, about a week. So here's the thing. Is rent control a good thing for a city, right? There's a lot of cities are rent controlled. Usually the most expensive cities are rent controlled. There's a lot of people who say that rent stabilization is the cause of the market rate apartments being so expensive, and others say that the market rate apartments being so expensive is the reason why we need rent stabilization. So there's arguments on both sides. It's like, which came first, right?
Right.
And so the argument for the former, where they say rent stabilization is the cause of the market rate units being so expensive, is they're saying the rental market is basically in two different camps. There's the lucky people who got their rent stabilized apartments, and then there are all the other people who have to find a market rate apartment. And so this is one of the quotes that I found from somebody who is for getting rid of rent stabilization. And the whole thing is that, taking units off the market with rent stabilization means there's higher occupancy rates, there's lower turnover, which all sounds like good things. Tenants don't want to lose a good deal, so they stay in their apartment. Totally makes sense. And his conclusion was, this means that newcomers or anyone not lucky enough to have a rent-controlled unit must compete for a more limited stock of market rate units. If New York City abolished rent regulations today, it would double the number of available market rate units, meaning housing costs would be shared more equitably across the population. As things stand now, many people pay more because so many others pay less.
Incorrect.
So this motherfucker is like, yo, I didn't get here in time to get a rent-stabilized apartment, so you who have been here for years with your family, you're never going to give it up, and that's just not fair to me. What the hell?
Also, he's straight up lying to you. Straight up, like, I want to punch the cat lying to you. Don't bring his in the studio. Yo.
And this was a Forbes article. I was like, are you
Of course it was a Forbes article. 'Cause Forbes don't punch enough people, man. Yo, Forbes, your editorial staff, y'all don't do enough.
They just let anybody contribute.
I'm just saying they don't. Well, no, I'm just saying they don't do enough speed bagging, man. Forbes, y'all need. Look, this is the real. Just because there are other apartments don't mean that anyone's going to make your apartment cheaper. The average price of New York City apartments is not going to go down.
No way.
It's not.
That makes no sense. And there is, I found an interesting fact, actually, that back around World War II time, New York City put in place a law that said if there was more than a 5% occupancy or 5% vacancy rate in the apartments in New York City, then they would get rid of rent stabilization laws. That has never happened.
Of course it's never happened.
There has never been more than a 5% vacancy rate in New York City. Competition is always going to be fierce for an apartment.
Yeah. You're talking about,
it's how it is.
You're going to convince more people to move to New York like people aren't dying to move to New York now.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, we're losing people who want to move here. That's not even true. So I'm sorry, dude, that you got here late and you can't find a rent-stabilized apartment. Sucks for you.
You can't stay with us either.
Yeah. So his whole thing, and what's interesting is that this is a big thing in Econ 101 courses is looking at New York City's what they call crazy like rent situation. So the whole idea of having the two rental markets and how it's out of control and it's driving prices of market rate apartments up, and the whole thing is just like, it's just not fair for the people who don't have rent stabilized apartments and blah blah blah. So that
blah blah blah.
I don't even know.
That was the quote. Blah
that
blah
was
blah.
the quote. I just don't even know what to say after that. Like after hearing that this guy just complain about the fact that he can't find a rent-stabilized apartment. So no one should have a rent-stabilized apartment is basically what he's saying. Like, oh, no one wants to move out of their sweet deal, so that's not fair to me. What's up with that? That's all he's saying. And so that's kind of the argument that a lot of people make. People are calling it, this is the quote that I saw from something else. The absurdity of New York City's housing market has become the standard part of many Econ 101 courses because it is such a clear example of public policy that achieves the near opposite of its goals.
Wait, why is that the opposite of its goals?
I have no idea. They're basically saying, well, because there's two rental markets, the market rate apartments are just astronomically priced compared to the rent-stabilized apartments. And that's all they're saying. That's it.
And again, by magic, if there were only one market, then somehow New York City would be cheap to live in?
Yeah. And so this is the prediction that a lot of economists say if you eliminate rent control. So many people who receive the government subsidy would have to leave their apartments, probably for the outer boroughs. The landlords of those units would invest in upgrades and charge higher rents. And then at the same time, the apartments that had been market rate would see their rent fall because there would suddenly be twice as many apartments on the market. So they're saying, oh, it's just going to adjust itself. Or this could happen, which is even more la la land. If you eliminate rent regulation, it would be a huge windfall for landlords. And then they'd propose a grand bargain where the landlords would have to pay higher property taxes and the extra city revenue could go to fund to help poor people afford market rate apartments.
Remember the marijuana episode? Remember how before the marijuana decriminalization in Colorado, your pothead would be like, dude, if you just taxed it, it would work out. And then like they did it and it worked. Well, you guys are doing worse drugs than the weed guys.
So basically,
I mean, like we're not economists, and I don't mean to be shouting down folks who've done, I guess, testing in ways, but this sounds a little too much like theory and not practicality.
Oh yeah.
And faith in people who don't exist.
Exactly. Like, so you're saying the landlords are going to renovate the apartments if they charge higher rent. And then they're going to pay more property taxes, and that money is going to go back to the poor people who can now, so that they can
well, not
afford
the poor
market-
people, because no one cares about the poor people in those conversations.
But they specifically said poor people. To help fund poor people to afford market rate apartments.
But poor people won't ever be able to afford market rate apartments because look at what the market rate apartments are.
Yeah.
That's a complete lie. What they mean are, I guess, upper middle class.
So what they're saying is we're just going to charge the landlords higher property taxes to get it back to what it is now. That's what it sounds like. Oh, we're going to charge them higher property tax, so they're going to charge higher rent, we're going to charge them more taxes, and then they're going to turn around and use those taxes to subsidize the market rate apartments that could have just stayed rent stabilized in the first place. This is their logic. So we have to go to a song right now because I'm pretty pissed off because that makes no sense. And afterwards, we're going to talk about some arguments about why rent stabilization is actually a necessary thing in expensive cities. And you can guess what side we're on if you want.
It's a good idea. We should take a break. I'm going to roll with another cat that we've lost. Her name is Pumpkinhead, or PH. He's got a dope joint called MC, where he explains about being an MC. Listen to him, and we'll talk to you in a moment. Brunch and Budget, Bonfire Radio.
Crown flooded with rubies and diamonds. On top of the dome of this man that's rhyming. That signifies I'm in a bracket beyond your mediocre back. Packing them seeds, sorry for cracking your teeth. I got a back smacking disease. And it flares up when I hear a rapper spit whacker than me. And don't fit the category that is corny. When another MC try to test me. But y'all, don't impress me, heavens to Betsy. I better jet ski, pull a disappearing act like Wesley. Before a nigga gets back his swagger and steps up the ladder. Grandma, get the camera and take a flick of your baby boy doing his thing. Looking like my dad, I swear we one and the same. And my son is the same. When we shine, the sun dries up, the rain and it'll brighten the day. Y'all do this for my bros locked up in chains. And I do it for MCs that grew up on cane. I do this for my brothers that sniffed dust and cane. And fucked up their brain, let's make a change. My needles only touch the wax, they don't touch my vein. DP gives a scratch. Give it up to a brother that avoided the vultures and will rap every step of this hip-hop culture. I'm an E-M-C-E-E, a smooth operator operating correctly. And I rep the 4 elements, so nigga respect me. It'll take more than your intelligence to test me. I'm an E-M-C-E-E, a smooth operator operating correctly. And I rep the 4 elements, so nigga respect me. It'll take more than your intelligence to test me. I'm an MC, but started out as a B-boy. Windmilling, backspinning on linoleum towel boy. Adidas shell tops, fat laces crossed over, designed a checker box. My boombox would knock. It woke up like half of my block. I put my best foot forward, but my hip wasn't hot. Shit was on lock. Most of my boys kept pistols on cock. I local hooky jam when kids did the walk. And we stopped and we watched and we rocked and we rocked and quickly went from shell tops to Reeboks, S-curls to hot tops. Black leather medallions with the Africa in it. I laughed cause I lived it and you did it. I made it a long way and I can't stop, man. I refuse to lose like Chuck D. I'm a strong black man. First and foremost, I'm still a hip-hop fan. This year Puffy went from making the band to hazing the band. Some say that he's fake, some say that he's great. But I'll be damned if I walk to Brooklyn to get your rich ass some cheesecake. That's not hip-hop. That's the type of shit that make me wanna not hip-hop and make the government and protest to stop hip-hop. You don't gotta agree with me, Mr. P. Diddy. Toe-to-toe lyrically, your artists can't compete with me. I'm faster, I'm the master, y'all rappers, and I'm a E-M-C-E-E, a smooth operator operating correctly. And I rep the 4 elements, so nigga respect me. It'll take more than your intelligence to test me. I'm a E-M-C-E-E, a smooth operator operating correctly. And I rep the 4 elements, so nigga respect me. It'll take more than your intelligence to test me. I'm a E-M-C-E-E, a smooth operator operating correctly. And I rep the 4 elements, so nigga respect me. It'll take more than your intelligence to test me. I'm a E-M-C-E-E, a smooth operator operating correctly.
And we are back. Brunch and Budget, Bonfire Radio. That was Pumpkinhead, PH with E-M-C-E-E. If you can spell it correctly. That's what he is and what he was. Shout out to him and his legacy and everything he's done. Today we're talking about the rent. Can we stabilize it? Should we stabilize it?
Should we stabilize it? So, right before the song, we were talking about people who wanted to get rid of rent stabilization altogether. They made the argument that the market right now is the way it is because we have some lucky people who get to stay in rent stabilized apartments. That's almost half of New York, by the way. Some lucky people who get to stay in their rent stabilized apartments while the rest of the people who aren't as lucky have to search for a market rate apartment.
AKA the tenuous balance that creates the wonderful dichotomy that is NYC.
Yes, thank you.
You know.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's what makes it great. So now we're going to talk about the other side of the argument, where there are people who make the argument that rent stabilization in New York City is necessary. And one of the first things is something that Dialect actually said earlier, where you win, 1 point for you. Rent control is not just a housing program for poor people. Rent stabilization is there to protect all tenants from being gouged during what people call a chronic housing shortage. I mentioned earlier that in World War II, they passed a law that would expire automatically. They passed a law on rent regulation that would expire automatically if the vacancy rates went above 5%. That has never happened since World War II.
Ever.
New York City has never had a 5% vacancy rate. I think it's maybe had a negative vacancy rate in the past, but it's never had a 5% vacancy rate. And if it did, rent stabilization would just be gone because we wouldn't need it.
Remember New Yorkers who've lived in New York and had to live in more than one place? Remember when your time was ending and you knew you weren't staying at that place? I don't know about you, but even when I was in a pretty stable position personally, I've had panic.
Yeah.
I've definitely been like, what, how am I going to, but I've done the thing where we're like, oh, we're searching all boroughs now. Mm-hmm. We're looking at every option because everything can be an option. Because, those wonderful, rent stabilized or controlled or finagled or semi or empty room with a water spigot, those places exist, but you got to do some digging and you might actually not find one. It's a scary thing for all of us.
It's funny that you say that because the number of rent stabilized and rent controlled apartments have been going down since 1997. Inflation, a housing shortage, fraud have led to deregulating a lot of apartments, and pretty much every vacant apartment in the lower half of Manhattan is destabilized at this point. So currently you're seeing apartments in Bay Ridge, Bed-Stuy, East New York, Astoria, Harlem, Washington Heights that are already over the $2,500 threshold. So you're looking at these far out places, not even Manhattan. It's all these places that you were talking about just now that you would have to look. Mm-hmm. There are apartments there that are destabilized because they've crossed that $2,500 threshold already. Mm-hmm. East New York, Washington Heights, Kingsbridge, Grand Concourse. You can find apartments.
You're mostly talking about places I've lived.
Yeah. Yeah, there are apartments there that are destabilized at this point. So the problem is getting worse because you're seeing rent stabilization go down. You're seeing more and more people getting pushed out of their own neighborhoods.
And one of the things, there's the, your gentrification issues and fears. And I know that a lot of this has to do with why New York City has such stringent tenants' rights stuff is because... Hey, you people who don't live in New York, I remember when Dialect didn't live in New York, and I looked at all the media and the film portrayals that New York landlords were slumlords.
Yeah.
I know that happens all over the place, but when you think of your slumlord, you're thinking of Joe Pesci in New York.
Right.
It's like super New York type of thing. And there's been a lot of great advocacy work to combat against that. And again, weird theoretical economists, that's actually the precedent of how landlords have treated things.
Right, exactly. Well, and that's the other scary thing about losing a having an apartment be destabilized is people who rent in a stabilized or rent-controlled apartment can't actually be evicted without a legal reason. And market rate apartments, the tenants have no right to renew their leases if the landlord doesn't feel like it.
Right.
So it's not even just
crazy.
a monetary thing. It's a matter of a life stabilization thing. It's not just stabilizing your rent, it's stabilizing your living space. You can't just get kicked out unless there's a real reason for it.
Safety and security. I mean, that feels like a thing that should be together with us and our lease. That whole, I'm paying you to live a place.
You would think so.
I do think so.
And the thing is, even though rent regulation is efficient, it actually does help a lot of lower income people. You know, it actually does help people who make less than $100,000 a year, for instance. Or, you know, I know that feels like a high threshold, but that is kind of a threshold we're living in New York. And 80% of the rent-stabilized apartments are actually occupied by people making less than $25,000 a year.
American Dream supporters, if you're into American Dream-like things, then you're into this type of regulation.
Yeah.
Because the way that we are able to take ourselves out of the situation we're in, whether we're making $20,000 or whether we're making that $100,000, but still need to pull ourselves up and still need help before we can make $500,000 and do all the things. Well, you need stuff like this.
Yeah, exactly.
This is how you create those dreams. It's, you know, again, folks working together.
Yeah. Word.
Even in hierarchical systems, even in things where people seem to be selfishly taking advantage, this is a thing where we are providing services to other folks and they're taking it up and making it work.
Yeah.
It's the system of New York.
Yeah, exactly. It's how it works. It's how it works as a big city. And I just want to end today with one great point from actually someone in San Francisco where they have crazy rent control laws that are even more strict than New York City. And this blog piece actually points out that it should be the responsibility of the landlord to purchase something that is going to make a profit. So you should not be buying something or investing in something if the numbers don't work out today based on the rules today. So there's an argument that landlords aren't making a profit, and if rent stabilization keeps up, then they're not going to make any money. It's like, well, you should be making money today. You should figure out whether those numbers work for you or not. It should be your responsibility as the person who's owning the building to make money on it and make the numbers work. It has nothing to do with, oh, we need to raise the rent for the tenant because I was irresponsible about my investment. It is not the tenant's responsibility to make sure that your investment stays afloat. And it's not their responsibility to make sure that you make a profit. That's it.
But you have responsibility. Remember, with great property comes great responsibility. With any property comes any responsibility. With a little plot of land, come on, man, somebody got to stand.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just wanted to end with that. We are crapping right now on the people who are not in a place of power, when really the people who are taking advantage of the tenants are the landlords who are saying, hey, I need to charge more because, whoops, my investment's going under.
Or it's not giving me as much as I want.
Yes, yeah, or I need more profit than what I plan to make. So we'll see how these rent stabilization laws pan out. It sounds like that there's something that's going to pass, not that they're just going to disappear from the rumblings that I've read. So it's really just a matter of coming to this compromise about what the new rent stabilization law should look like. And when we have updates, we will update y'all. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for listening. And yeah, we would love to update you and make sure that you know how things are going for next time you need to rent a place. And we're going to finish off with, last shall be first. When I first came to New York City, I went to the Tower Records because that still existed. We're happy you're gone, Tower. And I went for the underground rap section because there was an underground rap section. And the first CD I bought was Con Artist by the Scheme Team, which is a crew of heads, Block McCloud, a bunch of other dope MCs that included Pumpkinhead, Brooklyn Academy. And we're going to finish with that because, we're talking about Con Artists today. And we'll see you next week. Bunch of Budget, Bonfire Radio. Peace. Thanks.
Thinking of a master plan, scheme team, let the track expand and attack the land. They'll never turn your back on those cats who scan. They'll never put your guard down and smack my hand.
I scheme from New York to the land beyond. I scheme Girl Scouts for their candy bars. I can scheme a man in the desert for his last bottle of Avion. I burn champions like Tiger Balls. I can pick your pocket with the steadiness of pilot's arms. Wildin' on suckers who think I'm mild and calm. I'm like a silent alarm, the type to frighten your moms. Lighting the charm, biting my rhyme is like biting a ball. My shit's tight like a dyke in the thong. I can even scheme a priest into liking the song. I'm like a thief in the night. I strike and I'm gone. Release on them like a tight in my palm, writing these songs. The con artist, bombarded, engineers, uncharted. Pick out one target, leave him in his undergarments. Trooping through Brooklyn, stupid, dumb, retarded. Blooming like a summer garden. You never see me like a bum in carbons. To spit what I speak, you need a tongue enlargement. I'm coming charging, gunning like 100 sergeants. Scheme team, renaissance this, verbal calmness. I point like a compass, sexy like Congress.
Scheme team, even when you know us, you don't really know us. You shouldn't trust us as far as you can throw us. Always up to something, so we see the top the fastest. Don't put it past us. Scheme team, rock the masses. Scheme team, even when you know us, you don't really know us. You shouldn't trust us as far as you can throw us. Always up to something, so we'll see the top the fastest. Don't put it past us. Scheme team, rock the masses. Scheme to leave a lasting impression. Attack is an act of aggression. Hack you to sections with a rusty blade so you can catch an infection. This track's a reflection of acts that had me back in detention. Reflected off cracked glass, I'm a backstabbing intention. I'm that rap bastard and slap mask and tape on fat hairy ass kids. You asking for trouble, hard rocks, get blasted the rope. Like embassies in Africa, then I laugh at you and laugh. You're happy, you don't even know that half of you know the half I baffle you. I'm over your head, I hover, I'm of a craftier breed. Your wife's on my bed, I'm a lover while you looking after my seed. I went from last to the lead when I slash you bleed like hemophiliacs. I'm from Puerto Rico, me no feeling that. So zip it while I spit flows and burn you like a Zippo. Put you in a trance like a hypnosis. Split those like a schizo. Tiptoe through your tulips with two clips filled with bullets and steal your Pulitzer. Bust you up from feeling stupid and I'm trooping. The Brooklyn got you looking up at Jupiter when I'm scooping your leather wallet to fill my head with knowledge or where you kept your dollars.
Thinking of a master plan, scheme team. Thinking of a master plan, scheme team.
Scheme team, even when you know us, you don't really know us. You shouldn't trust us as far as you can throw us. Always up to something, so we'll see the top the fastest. Don't put it past us. Scheme team, rock the masses. Scheme team, even when you know us, you don't really know us. You shouldn't trust us as far as you can throw us. Always up to something, so we'll see the top the fastest. Don't put it past us. Scheme team, rock the masses.
Dispersing verbal chrome in your local nursing home. This verse is the perverse is known to walk the earth's surface alone without a purpose. Get your circuits blown. I fill your poem with silicone and leave you cancer prone. I'm old in France and Rome with these hands alone and turn the sands to stone. I'm stuck on girls like Lancome. I'll crush your collarbone into little cobblestones. My raps leave you broke like 1,000 college loans. I'll stomp your childish poems, so my style is grown. I'm a mansion, you a mobile home. A door without a bone, without the art to roam. I'll rip apart your poem. I'm the sharpest rap artist known. Running your lethargic tone, keep stepping in my target zone. You garbage, you get thrown. I'll break you down like syndrome, and there you like an ingrown. I'm out this ozone, flying on a snow cone, smoking homegrown, blazing in the outer space, no smoke zone. Word of mouth, scheme team, it's engraved in a milestone. Grab your cell phone, we off the hook, hit a dial tone.